Let's talk about the first story. We have this from military.com. New York governor may deploy National Guard to assist with healthcare vaccine mandate. Now, I got to say, first and foremost, this is a repost essentially from the Associated Press. That AP writes it, and then it gets picked up by a bunch of different outlets. But I noticed that they're, based on what Kathy Hochul said, governor of New York, versus what they're writing in news stories, I think they're kind of playing this soft. She may deploy the National Guard to assist with healthcare vaccine mandate. It's not her first plan, and it's only in the event she has to fire all of these people over the vaccine mandate, which sounds like their intent is to do it. We heard something similar in the UK when they said, we may deploy the army to drive trucks. The UK, one of the officials said, we have no plans to do this, but we're preparing to do it. You see, it's word games. When she comes out and says that she's going to enact a state of emergency, granting her the power to deploy medically trained National Guard because they're going to be firing nurses, I mean, that's straight up stating their intent to do so. I don't think it's fair to then be like, they might not do it anyway. Well, a lot of people might not do anything. Michael Bloomberg comes out and says, I'm going to tax soda. He might do it. Well, he literally said he was going to do it. So let's talk about what their intent is and the line they're drawing, as well as how far they're pushing us towards authoritarianism. So what I see as truly interesting about this and what's happening, and I think it's in Massachusetts, I'm not sure, maybe it was Rhode Island, where they're getting rid of where they're not getting rid of, they're sending in the National Guard to drive buses for school children. Because of the problems caused by the politicians destroying the private sector, like this is the perfect example. We're going to mandate a medical procedure with no exceptions, no testing exemptions, just straight up do it without legislative approval. Then when the market collapses, they're going to send in government agents to replace them. It sounds a bit like, I don't want to say fascism, because that implies like kind of an ultra traditionalist. This is kind of like Chinese state communism style. You're an economist, Robert. What are your thoughts on this stuff?
What I was going to say is exactly what you anticipated. That yes, standard operating procedure. The government lays down some legislation, or this case you're saying wasn't even legislation necessarily. Just makes some rules, edicts. Yes. Causes problems and then says, oh, well, gee, now that there's this problem, the free market can't solve it, so I guess we got to come in as the savior. And I don't like this idea that, whenever something isn't getting done, just send in the military because they know how to do everything, apparently. And as we know, if you want to get something done well and efficiently and with courtesy, you send in troops. Like, who else would you want to be, driving your school kids around except the National Guard?
This reminds me of a Ryan Long sketch where it was Antifa window repair. So it's like they dress up like Antifa and go around in the ride, smash windows, and the next day show up and say, hey, we can fix your windows. That's basically what we're seeing. They're like, unfortunately, all these nurses have not chosen to do the right thing.
Oh, no.
Now the government has to come in to clean up the mess. So we're seeing it with a lot of things. I mean, in terms of the authoritarian takeover, like, I don't know if you've been seeing what's going on in Australia. Have you been?
Yeah.
Do you see this video that's going viral? I don't know if you saw it, Ian or Lydia, where it's like a guy sitting at a fountain smoking a cigarette, and the cops come up and just throw him to the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And are, they're like, there's like 7 cops, and they're like, this woman's yelling, "What are you doing? Leave him alone!" And he has no reason to be here. It's like he went out for a walk. It wasn't wearing a mask. He was smoking a cigarette, and the cops are like, "We don't care." So that's kind of the direction we're heading in. But it's interesting that we're seeing a combination of. Well, maybe it's not interesting. The government takeover is hitting both the economy and law enforcement, I guess. So we're getting edict and we're getting we're having our economy shut down.
So my concern beyond the specifics of this and the injustice to the people involved is just the broader point. I think what they're trying to do is get the public more familiar with just seeing guys with big guns walking around, taking charge of the situation, like moving it towards what would be called a police state. So something that, decades ago, Americans would have thought that'll never happen here. They're not, in other words, they're not just going to say, oh, we're doing this because it's Big Brother here's watching you. They can't literally go from a Tuesday to a Wednesday, but they do this. So, National Guard. Well, no, they're just driving school buses because, those people won't get vaccinated. So, of course, they got to do that and just get us used to seeing guys in, camo walking around.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how kind of desensitized everyone's become to like a lot of this stuff? I remember I was in New York and I was walking past Grand Central Station and the cops that are there, they're like fully decked out in full armor. They look like stormtroopers and they've got, probably selective fire rifles of some sort. And I was just like, man, that's a crazy sight. And they have dogs and they're like standing next to the entrances. And I'm like, do we really need that? I guess. I mean,
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I was. So I went to grad school at NYU. So in 9/11, I was there. I mean, I wasn't literally. I was across in New Jersey, but yeah, for I think months after, I forget exactly when they phased it out, but yeah, there were, armored personnel carriers just on the streets, guys walking around with big guns, and you were sort of used to it, and I realized like, oh, this is what America would look like, down the road if Americans let it go that way, and it looks like they are letting it go that way.
Yeah, and then I've been hearing from a lot of people, a lot of military officers resigning, a lot of police officers are resigning. That's another big story. A couple dozen, I guess, dozens they say, of police in Massachusetts are resigning over the vaccine mandates. So, I mean,
can I just ask you too? And I think you alluded to it a minute ago. The thing about this that I haven't seen more people bringing up is just on its surface. So I understand that, yeah, especially in healthcare, people with certain conditions, they might be genuinely concerned. I don't want, a nurse dealing with me who hasn't been vaccinated. But wouldn't it also be good just to show, no, I had this, like that I have antibodies? Like, to me, that would be a more important test to say, yeah, I had COVID 3 months ago, I beat it. And yet I don't even see that being discussed, let alone like addressed and dealt with.
When they say we don't care about negative tests, when they say they don't care about antibodies, they're saying this has nothing to do with the infection, it has everything to do with control.
Right.
I mean, they can come out and say all day and night that this is about public health. And I'm like, then wouldn't you actually follow the science? But they don't do that. The science, in many instances, there has been a lot of science that should and could and should be questioned. Yet what do you get? Censorship. All right, shout out to Ryan Long again, because he has a sketch where he just put out today, I think, called like Trust the Experts or whatever, where he comes out and he's like, all the experts agree. And then, his buddy walks up, I think Danny's his name, and he's like, I'm an expert and I read the data and came to a slightly different conclusion. Then Ryan Long starts punching him and he's like, shut up, and kicking him. He's like, the experts agree. That's basically what we're seeing. What I was going to say about the police resigning over vaccine mandates. You mentioned, people getting used to seeing, cops out in the street and things like this. It really is amazing to me how far we've gone, where I can talk to my friends who aren't very political, and I'll say, like, if I would have told you 3 years ago they'd bar people from leaving their homes, that they'd be mandating you get a medical procedure, albeit a small one. I'm not saying they're going to cut out your appendix or anything. Otherwise, you can't work. And that, we'd see widespread riots and there would be nobody would believe it. Nobody believe it. If I told you that the government would deploy, tens of thousands of National Guards surrounding the Capitol with fences, they'd be like, get out of here. If I said there'd be people storming, no one would believe any of it. It's all been so chaotic. People are desensitized. And now we're at the point where the good cops who are like, you can't make us do this, and this is not constitutional, are all resigning. But there are cops who are staying. And those cops are not going to be the good cops who are like, I'm not going to, enforce that when that crosses the line. What we're going to be left with is a military of a bunch of people saying, like, I don't know, just following orders. And a bunch of police saying, I don't know, just following orders. And then what do we get?
Yeah, I think that's what concerns me too, about like the advertising, like the woke advertising for the CIA and all that, and they're making it the case that after they get rid of the questionables and the people with these domestic ties and so forth, that they're going to replace them with the right kind of people who are then going to implement these. Because right now, you're right, the sort of top-down commands that they want to issue, there'd be a lot of resistance or hesitancy to enforce this stuff. But I think they're looking ahead and saying, oh, no, we got plans in place so that 5 years from now, the personnel staffing these organizations are not going to be the ones that were here, so they will follow those orders.
One thing that's interesting to me though is that often powerful interests, special interests, politicians use economics as a means of controlling the system, right? How do you make someone behave the way you want? Well, you tax their item. Michael Bloomberg was like, we're going to tax large sodas so people are stupid and fat, so that way they won't buy them and things like that. Tax cigarettes, tax gasoline. In this instance, they're going overt authoritarianism. I wonder if would you agree they typically use economic power to pressure people?
Well, I think you're right. Even in this instance, though, in other words, instead of Washington just saying every American, except for maybe people with certain exceptions because of vulnerability, has to get this vaccine. No, we're not saying that. We're just saying if you want to work at a large organization,
yeah,
you're free to not have an income. Yeah,
so, you're free to go into the woods.
Right. So even
I agree with that. You are.
Yeah, and that's also like with the big tech and so like that's part of the way they're doing this is a sort of an end run, and there's coercion involved. This isn't like a free market outcome. But I think you're right that they realize it's easier, to get someone to say, well, my boss is making me do it and I need my job. I got to support my kids. Whereas if we're just a matter of paying a fine and going to jail for 30 days, they might, stand up to the man.
And this is the crazy thing about it. It's that we've become accustomed to, acclimated, and locked into, in a sense, right? People are so used to living in climate-controlled homes with refrigerators and microwave stoves, natural gas, easy access to the supermarket. They're like, I can't give that up. My kids need this. And I'm like, I don't know, 300 years ago, some dude was like foraging through the weeds for food for his family. And that being said, people today don't really have the ability to go and forage and farm on their own because land is owned and controlled by everybody. So we're at this point now where the planet's basically been labeled, claimed by enough people or interests that if you did leave your job, what can you do? I mean, theoretically, you can go to like Sharon in Mexico and then start figuring things out. You can go to the middle of nowhere. But if you have a family, you can't just stake a claim anymore. You can't just go to land and be like, okay, I'm going to farm here and survive. Nope, they locked you in. So what do you do?
Well, you can start a new career path as a internet video blogger.
True.
So hopefully you did it 2 years ago because, now you don't have much time to get it going if you're going to have to resign from your job.
I don't know if you saw the conversation I had with Jack Murphy. What was that? That was a week and a half ago or so.
Something.
I didn't see
He was talking about how his kid wants to play, college sports, varsity sports, and then college sports, and now they're saying, well, you got to get vaccinated. So he's like, it's tyranny. He doesn't think the vaccine's going to hurt his kid or anything like that. He just thinks the government's trying to force him to do it, and it's a difficult position where he doesn't want to tell his kid not to play baseball. And my attitude was like, I think you should tell your kid not to play baseball. I think if you truly believe in it, you should stand up and say, I'm not. No, if there's, the government isn't my doctor and shouldn't tell me, what I'm supposed to be doing. The issue, much bigger than just baseball is, I saw a video of it was a medical worker saying, if I have to support my family, I can quit and then we're completely broke, or I can get the vaccine. And so they were like, I guess I have no choice. And that's where people are at. The government is not only, I think this is a sign of how bad it's really, really going to get. If they have people so constrained and so scared that they will undergo a medical procedure, then what else can they do?
Get off the central electric grid, for starters. Get off the centralized fiat currency grid, secondly. So that means crypto, solar power, grow your own food. Get off the centralized food grid. Those are 3 things you can do.
Homesteading, get a place out in the middle of nowhere, grow your own food, get some chickens.
Work on
we're
the
big
internet.
fans of chickens.
Have small companies. Let's do lots and lots of small companies.
Yeah, but like, what do people do? How much work being done by people is actually contributing to the lives of individuals, like food production and things like that. Fuel. Most people, to be fair, we produce a relatively small amount of goods for people. I mean, I guess people can say that thought and planning, and this is the kind of stuff that goes into fixing economies and making people live better, so it's good. But we're not fixing any toilets. We're not growing any bread. We're not feeding anybody.
So I have many friends who work in the service industry, whether it's in food or like I used to work in a hospital, and they're saying that they're being required to get the vaccine. And when I read the numbers of Americans who live from paycheck to paycheck, it is not surprising to me at all that they're able to require this of people who really don't want it. I had a Facebook friend who recently got it, and she's like, you win, Joe Biden, because I have to do this to keep my career. And I was like, that's really sad. You shouldn't have to do that. But I also know that you have 3 kids, your husband can't work, and you know that if you don't take this shot, you will have to find an entirely different career. This job pays much better than working as a waitress or something. So I completely understand. It's a hard situation. I don't like that we're being put in it, but we're going to have to figure out how to stand up to it.
Yes, you guys are right that it's not literally impossible to avoid this stuff, but also too, just like you're saying, that's part of the reason I think that they monopolize the money supply is because they knew what better way to put the screws to people,
right?
And so their high income tax, and let me just go outside the standard healthcare system. Well, no, you can't, because there's the FDA, the CDC. You can't just open up your own hospital and say, hey, here people don't need to be vaxxed. So that ultimately would be the solution in a genuinely free society. That because people say, oh well, so should my kids not? What if they had the measles or something? You're against all, and it's not that there's just some from on high some right thing to do. It's like each building or each organization could set its own rules. Like you were saying, sports, they could decide do the kids need to get something or not, whether to participate. And they would have certain uniform requirements or what. A kid couldn't show up to play naked and play football,
Right.
among other reasons, because that's not sanitary. Right. And so or a kid's bleeding out or something and said, no, I want to play. It's my decision. My dad said I'm fine. So there's things to do. And the way to ultimately handle it is not us making a case by case, but to have the organization set the rules. The problem here is the government has got its just tentacles and everything so much that they can kind of force this outcome.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.